I know what you're thinking. Kathie, where the hell have you been, Loca? I know. All 10 of you out there have been wondering where we've been. As you can see, things look a little differently here. And by now, you've probably read the title of this video and have figured it out. But we've moved. KBCS has packed up and moved completely across the country from Orlando, Florida, all the way to Seattle, Washington. Because of that, we've been really quiet on YouTube as we've been navigating the transition, but we're back-ish, kind of, sort of. I wanted to do a little bit of a part business update, part personal update, part montage of my cross-country road trip. So let's talk about what's been going on, where we've been, and what's coming next. So when we first launched this channel, I knew I didn't want it to be all tutorials and tips. I wanted it to be informative and educational, but I wanted it to reflect what we actually do at KBCS and a little bit about who we are behind the work. Not to mention, I have a fuck ton of footage from my cross-country road trip that I've been wanting to share. So I thought this was the perfect opportunity for us to break our silence here on YouTube, get back into videos, and show more of that KBCS behind-the-scenes content. So let's start with why we moved. If you didn't already know, KBCS was previously located in Orlando, Florida. I grew up in South Florida, moved up to Orlando for college, and I loved it. And then in 2014, I moved to Charlotte, North Carolina. I lived there until about 2017 when I moved back down to South Florida. I realized very quickly that I didn't want to live in South Florida for many reasons that I won't bore you with, but I just knew it wasn't for me. Even though towards the end of my time living there, I was so ready to move out, I will say I'm so glad that I did do the move because I got to experience living in South Florida, Miami, in my hometown as an adult and doing day-to-day adult things. I think it was able to help me confirm that it was the type of environment that I didn't want for myself. Miami is a beautiful city and it will always be home, but it just wasn't for me. I moved back to Orlando in 2020, which again, I loved. I feel like I have a very special connection with Orlando. I had so many formative years there. I had so many friends there. I had built a creative community there. And moving back to Orlando really was such a great experience. But being real, I felt like I was kind of starting to grow out of Florida overall. I was born and raised in Florida. I have lived over 27 years in the state. I have had my entire education in the state. I've visited most of the major cities in the state. My family lives there and I will always consider it home. But deep down in my core, I was just ready for a change. My time in North Carolina was something that really stuck with me. I learned a lot about living in a new city, in a new state, being without my family and not seeing them for long periods of time, making new friendships and making new connections. And while it was definitely hard sometimes, it taught me a lot about myself and what I wanted for myself. And it shifted my mindset on how and where I wanted to live. While I was living in Florida, I found myself missing having seasons. I missed the outdoors. I missed driving in the mountains. I missed being able to go out on a hike or a walk and not die in the inferno that is the Florida heat. That slower pace and the access to trails and the mountains. I'm not this like huge outdoorsy person. I'm not like this big hiker or anything like that, but I crave that proximity to that type of nature and the change of scenery. So for a long time, probably since 2022, I've been considering a big move. It just took me some time to figure out where. So why Seattle? I promise Seattle wasn't totally random. Back in 2020, in the height of the pandemic, I was without a job. I had been living in Miami for about 3 years at that point, and already I knew I wanted something new. So I actually decided to start applying to jobs outside of South Florida. We, my husband and I, wanted to consider potentially doing a West Coast move. Based on our experience living a little closer to the mountains in North Carolina and the very little that we knew at the time of the Pacific Northwest, we actually had thought about Seattle being a potential contender of where we could move. It felt like a place that aligned with what we liked and our lifestyles. It was still a major city and it was growing really rapidly. A lot of tech companies were opening up headquarters in Seattle and in the Seattle areas. And being truly transparent, I am a little bit of a Twilight fan myself, judge me. But the moody gloominess of the PNW really interested me. So I applied to jobs in both Seattle as well as Orlando just because I already knew and loved Orlando, and realistically at the time, that just was a reasonable move that I could have made. But I actually winded up getting a job in Orlando first. So in 2020, I moved from South Florida to Orlando. Fast forward to March 2022, I visited Eugene, Oregon for a photo shoot, and I immediately fell in love with the PNW vibes. The crisp in the air, the mountains, the foggy mornings, the cozy vibes. I was in love, honestly. It was everything that I imagined. My husband and I then visited Seattle in September 2022, and we did love it. I don't think we were convinced to move just yet because we wanted to see other cities on the West Coast. But even when we did, Seattle always kind of stayed at the top of the list. We loved the vibes, the accessibility to hikes, the outdoorsy things, the history, the food. It felt like a place that aligned with our personal values and our long-term goals. One of those being its proximity to Japan, which is a place that my husband and I love and we travel to frequently, and we hope to in the future stay more long-term. But the idea to move to Seattle kind of fell on the back burner. In 2023, I had a major surgery. Priorities kind of shifted. I traveled, and being transparent with the situation of the country at the end of 2024, 2025, we were even starting to potentially consider an international move instead. So for a good chunk of 2025, we spent the time researching, planning, saving for a potential international move. I actually visited Seattle in early 2025 for a photo shoot. And I remember while I was here, I was like, man, I really love this place and maybe I should move here instead. But at that point, we were so deep into planning and logistics and visas for a potential international move that I kind of just brushed it aside. After months of looking into our options and having really difficult conversations with each other about what we really wanted, what were our future goals, our financial goals, my goals with KBCS, all those conversations ultimately led up to my husband and I making the decision that maybe an international relocation wasn't the right move for us right now. Maybe still in the future, but we wanted to be able to have more time to prepare so that we can make the most out of this experience as opposed to rushing into it just for the sake of doing it. But here's the thing, we still wanted to move out of Florida. So that's kind of how Seattle came back into the forefront. I feel like once we decided that that was the direction we wanted to go in, everything really fell into place really fast. In October, my husband went to a job fair that a friend of his had recommended, and within a couple of weeks, he was offered a role that offered relocation to Seattle. The next thing I knew, we had a month to move, a month to say goodbye to friends, to family, to pack up our things and wrap things up and move myself, my husband, our pets, and KBCS to Seattle. Saying goodbye was really hard. The move happened what felt like so fast. If you've ever moved, you know that there's a lot of things that you have to do beforehand. You start getting rid of things, maybe you're selling furniture, scheduling any last minute appointments, trying to squeeze in any last minute plans that you can with any of your friends. And with that limited time that we had to move, it made that time feel like a whirlwind. I will say it was not easy for me to say goodbye to Orlando. I love Orlando. And when I first had to leave back in 2014, it was very difficult for me. I was not ready. I didn't even want to leave. So when I did move back in 2020, it made me very happy to be back, to reconnect with old friends, and even to make new ones. I made so many new friends in my second move to Orlando. I felt like I was welcomed back to Orlando with open arms, with a creative community that was really just the best. They offered me opportunities to put my name out there and mentor students and host workshops and speak at events. But leaving Orlando this time felt a little different because I feel like this time I felt a little bit more ready. I truly am so grateful that I got to live in Orlando again and all of the friendships and connections that I made this time around. Orlando has a very, very special place in my heart, but I felt ready to start a new chapter and have something new. So we packed up our life, loaded everything into a moving truck, and drove cross country from Florida to Washington with our dog, Pizza. We have a few friends sprinkled around the US, so that kind of determined a lot of our stops initially. We visited friends in Tennessee, in Arkansas. We stayed at a friend's apartment in Denver. And then after that, our stops were just what made sense for the drive. Overall, we crossed 11 states, 3,075 miles, and it took us 8 days. I've never driven across the country. At most, I've driven along the East Coast from Florida to New York. But besides a few days in Chicago, I've never been to the Midwest. I've never seen the Great Plains. I've never seen the Rocky Mountains. And it really was such an incredible experience. Getting to see parts of the country that I probably would have never seen, and stopping at random small towns and stopping at beautiful scenic spots. It was so cool. I remember feeling like I had lost all sense of time. We had left Florida right when the time changed for daylight savings, and then we crossed 4 time zones. So there were times where I didn't know what day it was, what time it was, nothing. I was just so out of it. Fortunately, we had no issues, no car issues, no weather issues, no traffic issues. It was a pretty smooth experience. Our pup Pizza did so good on the trip. He really is such a good road trip dog, and I loved being able to bring him along on this experience. I feel like he really enjoyed it too. But yeah, around mid-November, we were officially in Seattle. So here we are, Washington residents for the most part. We've been here for about 3 months now, and we're still kind of settling into our new home. I've spent a good chunk of this time unpacking, acclimating, setting up my new workspace, trying to set up my new studio space, keeping up with our clients. Q4 is notoriously super busy for us, and doing it all in the middle of a move, 10 out of 10 do not recommend. Definitely not for the faint of heart. We're finally getting into the swing of things. We're picking back up on newsletters. We're planning future YouTube videos. We're picking back up on social content, all that jazz. Slowly, but surely. I'm also really stoked to get involved in the local creative community here in Seattle. I'm excited to go to more events and conferences on the West Coast now. Maybe connect with some of you in person and just be outside more. I'm very curious and excited to see how this change of scenery really impacts my creativity. Right now, KBCS is still very much in motion. We've actually started off the year really hot. We're still supporting our clients. We're growing our team. We're growing our collaborators list. We're working on some really cool projects that we hope to share within the next coming months. So we'll be releasing new videos on YouTube soon. We've got a couple of ideas lined up. So if you haven't already, make sure that you subscribe so you don't miss out on what's coming up next. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments, whether it's about the move, the business, or about any future content that we have planned. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure that you give us a little thumbs up. Feel free to follow us on Instagram at WeAreKBCS to keep up with all things KBCS. Catch you in the next one. Bye. All right, make sure my posture. All right, let's go. Okay. Foot's falling asleep. Foot's falling asleep. Oh my God. Oh my God. Floating here.